So today's lecture today is a part of a long-standing series that we've had. I think this is probably our 8th or 9th one that we've done on IT security, and most of them are archived up on @ONE's One for Training website, so you can go back and look at the last ones. Last week we did one on cloud security, cloud computing and security related to that, and this time we're going to talk about physical and environmental security for IT. So in this one, I actually have a lot of slides, but we're going to get through most of them. Things that we're going to talk about when we talk about physical and environmental security, we're going to talk about how does that relate to information systems. So when we talk about computers, we know that if we're a hacker or something like that, physical access to a computer will actually grant someone access, and even if we had access controls on it, it's not going to make any difference because they have physical access to the machine. So that's where the physical security comes in and where it's really important. The other part that we have is the environmental protection. Everybody says environmental protection. They think, oh, that means about the green and greenhouse gases. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the environment. We're talking about the power that goes to the system. What kind of fire security do you have, or fire protection do you have for it? So when we say environment, we're talking about the environment that the IT exists in. So we're going to talk about air conditioning and stuff like that. So there are some safety issues related to this, and I want to call those to your attention up front. We're not going to get into all the life safety issues, just the ones as it relates to IT and IT controls that we have in place. So we'll start off with what are some of the threats? So computers have threats, and what are some of them? Obviously, one of the ones that we're going to be concerned about when we look at the environmental aspect is heat. Heat is probably one of the things that burns up more processors or hard drives than anything else. And so that's why we have air conditionings in server rooms and things like that. What about water? Computers and electronics typically don't play very very nicely with water. Leaks from pipes and from overflowing toilets on the floor above and floods or whatever weather all play a part in damaging computers. That means the computers won't be available. Another aspect to physical security is theft. I know with a lot of the colleges in the community college district, one of the things that typically, or I've heard a number of schools had problems with, is projectors walking away, right? Projectors are left in the rooms, and nobody's in the room, and the student sees it, takes off with it, and we never know who did it. Power issues. What are we going to do what happens if the power goes out? What are we going to do to protect the system in that? What if the power is not just lost, maybe what if it spikes? In other words, there's extra energy sent down the pipe, and when it does, it hits our system and it blows our system up. What about fire and smoke damage? What about natural disasters? We just had tornadoes here in Northern California. I'm not in Northern California right now, but last week there was tornadoes in Northern California, which is not typical, right? And 2 weeks ago there was an earthquake in Japan, something that we weren't necessarily, that they had been preparing for, but that's a disaster that may happen. How are those businesses getting everything back up and running again? And then we have man-made disasters, things like chemical spills. And you think, oh, we're not going to have any chemical spills. But we had a janitor spill some ammonia into something else, and it gave off toxic fumes, and so we had to evacuate a building. Well, that's great. Maybe that was only a small thing, but what happens if that's near the server room? We can't get to it, and we need to have access to it. What if it was something worse than that? You have chemistry departments, well, what happens if something happens there? And then finally, we have things that may cause loss of life. So where do we go to start? Physical security and environmental security, where should we start? There should be a policy. If we're talking about a community college, that community college should have a policy in place that says physical security is important, and it's not just about physical security, about protecting assets, but it's also limiting access so that people can't have access to computers that don't need to have access to them physically. And part of that is we should figure out what the roles and responsibilities are. Management is demonstrating that they're committed to it, and then they need to organize that coordination between IT and the physical security, because typically you're going to have some type of campus police. Well, great, you have campus police, but do they realize that they need to be protecting computer systems, protecting access to wire closets, those types of things. Are they aware of those things? And so IT folks that are doing the security for IT should at least have conversations with those folks so that at least they know where those areas are, right? So if there's a wiring closet on the second floor, they need to know where it is so that if the guards are around and they see somebody snooping around in there, maybe that's an issue. Maybe we need to go and check in on it. So after we have a policy, one of the things that we're going to have to address in that is granting physical access to things. Our server room should not be set up so that it's a turnstile and people just walk through it. If number one, people can have accidents, right? So I was on an audit once where the computers, they were taking the computers out of the computer room, and I was like, oh, what happened with you're upgrading your computers? They said, oh, no, the network admin was in there the other day, and he put his coffee on the rack when he was working on something because he had been standing there all day working on a computer. He accidentally bumped it, knocked it off, and fried a computer. So obviously having drinks and stuff near the computers is not a good idea. But also in addition to that, having other people just having access to it is not a good idea because they can do those type of accidents as well. You see the mattress down there, and there's a reason for the mattress being on this slide. It's a story that I like to tell because it kind of illustrates the point really well. One of the things that an auditor found when they were doing stuff is they were checking out the minimal point of entry, which is where the services from Pac Bell or whoever provides your telephone lines, where they come into the buildings, and there's what we call the minimal point of entry, which is a wire closet that has all your phone lines and all that kind of stuff. Typically, we want to secure those rooms because if we were a hacker and we wanted to eavesdrop on conversations on a network, all we have to do is get access to that, and we can then listen to what's going across the wire, snoop in on things. So when the auditor went in there, what they found was that mattress on the floor. And so this was kind of odd. How did the mattress get on the floor, and why was it there in the first place? Well, it turned out, after they did some investigation, that employees were taking breaks and hooking up with other employees. And so what happened is somebody had set it up so that if someone wanted to take a break and somebody else wanted to take a break, they can go there and do whatever they were going to do. So the issue was they weren't in there to do anything bad with the wire closet, but they shouldn't have had access to it. And the other question is, how and when did someone get a mattress into a closet that barely had enough room for the mattress? Really, that should be a sensitive area. It shouldn't have had access to everybody, and people were using it as a place to hook up. So that obviously tells us that there's a problem with our physical security some way. So what we have to do is when we look at our system, we look at our campus or we look at our building, we have to figure out what internal areas are going to be restricted or sensitive or secure areas. Obviously the server room and server closets and wiring closets should be. We don't want people in there messing with stuff. Where your wireless access points are, you want to make sure that people don't have access to them so they can just pull them off the wall or anything like that. So we got to figure out where those areas are to determine how we're going to deal with those. What types of controls are we going to put in place? Obviously, we don't want students to have access to the computers that could possibly modify their grades, right? So we want to make sure that if there's an area where admissions is entering records or something like that, that there's some controls there physically that people can't get into those areas. So we have to kind of figure out what we have and look at building diagrams or campus diagrams to kind of figure out where might we not want to have people in. So we have to take a look at that, figure out where our servers are, where our wiring closets are. And 9 times out of 10, people do a really good job on the server room, but then they don't do a good job on the wiring closets. In fact, we had one campus where the janitor's closet was also the wiring closet. So they had water pipes, leaky pipes in there with their main core switch for the whole entire campus sitting right next to water pipes that, janitors were using. So number one, janitors are in there. So that means other people probably have access to that closet. In addition to it, a wash basin sitting right next to the switch. So what does that mean? There's a potential that there could be water damage on that switch, which would then have taken out the entire campus, right? And then you're going to have, how many? You may have a 4-hour turnaround time on your warranty, so you can get a new one out. But if you don't have it because you don't have the budget for it, then it may take a couple of days to get the network back up and running. Not only that, just getting the hardware back is not even going to set up your network. You still have to set up your whole entire network again. It has to be configured. So hopefully you have a backup for your switch, right? So physical access control, we have to have some type of way of enforcing that access authorization so that only authorized people can have access to it. So typically what most of us do is we have some type of key control. So for those closets in that server room, we give only keys to the people who are supposed to have them. But then we have issues with master keys, and we have to know who has those and that kind of thing. So we want to make sure that we control all that. And anything that's publicly accessible in areas such as if we have a switch that's in a public area, how are we going to secure that? So where I work, we actually have set up so that we actually have a key fob that in order to get in the server room, it's a little scanner. We have our little key fob. We put it out, and then it's a proximity detector. It picks up that we have the fob, then unlocks the door. We can open the door. We can get into the server room. And only 3 people have access to the server room. We limit it to that many people because most of the network technicians can do most of their stuff remotely. So we don't want to have a whole lot of people walking through there and leaving coffee cups or anything like that. Other things you have a combination on doors. You may have keys for doors. Keys are the hard ones because if someone leaves or loses a key, you have to rekey everything. If someone loses a fob, you just go into the access control system and you turn it off. Someone has a question. So type your question down into the chat room and then or the chat area, and then we can answer it. Oh, you're on both, or you're having a problem with reverb. At the very bottom of the screen, there's like a little thing that either looks like a microphone or a headset. And if you're on the phone, hit the thing that looks like a phone headset, and then it'll turn off the sound won't come out your speakers. So physical access control. What about exterior ones? I love this one because if you've seen the Simpson episode, Mr. Burns is going through all these access controls. It's doing like a biometric test. He has to stick his face in the thing and has to recognize his feet to let him in. He finally gets to the server room and there's a back door open and some dogs walking in. So he went through all these access controls, but there was an exterior access to it. I've been on audits where the server room has a glass window to the outside and maybe had a door with a glass window. And when I went to was doing the audit, I told them, well, this is kind of a problem because, one, someone can easily break the glass and get into your server room. Well, what protections do you have against that? Not only that, they can look right in and see that it's a server room. Well, they were in the process of upgrading it, or they were going to block off the window and get the door removed, but they didn't get to it because they didn't have the budget right away. And what happened was a storm happened, a tree fell, broke the window in the door, and was letting rain in during a storm right into their server room. So that exterior security, you want to make sure that if your server room is on an exterior wall, that you have some type of protections for it. You don't have windows to that outside. If you have windows, seal them off if you can. I've seen a number of times like that where the windows has been broken and people have gotten into it. The question is, what about the janitors and electrical techs to the data center? If any of them go into the data center, typically it's a good idea to monitor their activities while they're in there. In other words, someone goes along with them while they're in the server room until they leave, because it's not your staff. They don't work for necessarily the campus or the college. So you don't want them just snooping around. So typically you should have one of your network techs follow them around until they leave the secured area and you verify that they're out of there. Some organizations I've seen where they've had cameras inside the server room and then someone can watch remotely to see what the person's doing. So that's one way to do it. Ours have access to everything at any time. Well, and that becomes a problem. See, at our office where we have it, janitors don't even have access to the server room. They're not cleared to have access. They don't need to have access. We don't have a trash can in there, therefore they don't have access to it. If any maintenance needs to be done, it has to all go through our IT department, and that's how we deal with it. And that's a good way to deal with it. So physical access controls, different ways of doing it. You can have key logs. If you have keys, you're going to have key logs. If they get lost, you have to rekey things. How do you get your keys back when someone leaves the organization? I worked for a college that will remain nameless, and I guess if you know me, you know who that is. I still have the keys to the campus. They never asked for them back, and they haven't rekeyed the thing. And I don't even know where the keys are. But I remember not giving them back because I went to give them back, and the person wasn't in, so I kept them and never went back there. So now I have keys to their campus. I'm a good guy, so they don't have to worry about it, but what if a bad guy, what if a disgruntled employee who leaves and has access to things? What are we going to do about that? If we have combination locks, like a door combination locks, at least those can be changed without having to rekey anything. So what are some times when we need to address that? If somebody's terminated or leaves, we need to then probably address the issue to determine if the keys need to be rekeyed or anything like that, if they haven't given them back to us. And what if they're lost or compromised? What if they lose their keys? Well, if they lose their keys, we don't know who possibly has it. Maybe nobody has it. Maybe it's in the seat of their car and they just can't find it. Well, there's no risk, but we don't know that that's where they are. So sometimes we have to rekey things, and that can sometimes be expensive, so we want to be careful with that. So doors, generally for access control purposes, generally you want to have no more than 2 doors to a server room. Generally 1 is enough. Sometimes we have electronic door locks so that it has electronic access systems. Generally we put strike plates on those doors so people can't kick the doors in, and tamper-resistant hinges. I went to one place and I went to look at it, and the hinges were on the outside of the server room door. So that means all I had to do is pop the hinges out and the door would fall off I could take the door out and then I could get into the server room. So how does that stop me from getting into the server room? If I really wanted to get into it, not a problem. All I have to do is take the hinges out. So most of them will have, most industrial buildings and campuses will typically have this. The door frame is actually going to be made of metal, not wood, so it's not going to be able to do that. They'll have fire-rated doors so that they're going to be very difficult to knock down anyways. And sometimes, I remember this one place in San Jose, it's a high-tech company. You go down there and they have, their whole server room is nothing but, there's a walkway that goes from one side of the office to the other, and then there's a big glass wall between that walkway and their server room because they like to show off all the expensive servers they have, which is great, but those windows are not even tamper-resistant glass. I could break any one of them and get in if I really wanted to. And maybe if I'm just a disgruntled employee, I'm not going in there to steal anything. I'm going in there to blow the place up or pour water all over the servers to turn them off or whatever the deal is. That reminds me of that movie Office Space. You remember that guy with the little the stapler and he got all upset at the end and burned the place down? We want to make sure that we protect from those types of things. So we want to make sure that we have shatterproof glass so people can't get into those areas. Another types of things to control things for that, if we have like a server rack and we don't have a room that it's in, or we share that room with a janitor or something like that, we may want to use something like this where it's a rack and the rack actually has a lock on the door. So we have to have a key to get into it. Not only is, because if it's a semi-public access area, we still need to control access to the servers. We don't want people having access to the servers, so maybe we get what we call them enclosures that actually have locks on them. Other types of areas that we need to consider, anywhere where there's Ethernet ports, telecom ports, wire closets, spare jacks, conduit trays or cables, any of those types of areas are possible areas where someone gets upset and they just see a bundle of wires and they cut them all up, or, students do stupid things for stupid reasons. We don't always know what they're doing. Some of them may go in there and just cut all the wires just for vandalism's sake. And then we have to rerun wire for every place. So maybe we'll want to make sure that they can't see where the wire trays are going, or it's out of reach of everybody. So output device control. So we have output devices like printers and monitors and all that stuff. And the biggest issue that we have here is that people may steal them and walk away with them. Printers, monitors, projectors are a big thing. Using some type of device that like cable locks and stuff like that. But we've even had cable locks. I've seen on one campus they had cable locks. And students go in there with those. They're like big scissors, but they can cut locks and stuff like that, and then they'll break the cables and they'll take off with those. So again, we're trying to protect from theft because we all have budget issues. We don't want to buy an extra projector if we don't want to have to, so we want to protect those things. So we want to protect those devices and put some type of control in place so that people can't walk off with them, or at least if they do walk off with them, they're going to have a hard time doing it. Monitoring physical access. One of the ways that I talked about is to have CCTV or cameras. Generally, for IT, we may want to have that in the server room. So again, if we have someone who has access to the data centers and we don't have the staff to follow, maybe someone can watch the monitors while they're in there. Another reason why we might have to do it, this becomes a safety issue, is any place where cash is being used, like at admissions or something like that. you typically want to have cameras there in case someone comes in and robs the place, and that you can get access to who they are. And that's not really a physical security issue related to IT, but that same areas, if we have credit card machines, we should have, for PCI reasons, which is the payment card industry, which is security standards that we have to have if we accept credit cards. Any of those credit card swiping devices have to be protected, and we should have some type of controls in place that if someone tried to modify that receiver, that swipe device, that we would catch it during the normal course of business. And the easiest way to do that is with TVs. So that is typically at the same place that the cash collection site is. So we have cash collection, we have the monitors there for theft reasons for people stealing money, but then for the IT side of it, we're really trying to make sure that they don't either take off with the credit card devices or try to alter the credit card devices to gain entry or steal people's credit card numbers. And we should log access to certain devices. A good example, there's devices that will help you log access. One of them, and this isn't an endorsement of their product, but NetBots has a monitoring device you put in your server room. It monitors temperature, monitors humidity, does all that. In addition to it, some of the units have cameras on it. Anyone who walks in the door takes a picture of them. So you don't have to have a camera running all the time. It can actually take a picture of whoever comes in there, and then you know who the last person in the server room was. That gives you the ability to detect and respond to incidents. So there's all kinds of different cameras out there, and we really can't get into all the different types of cameras because that's a whole another thing all by itself, and we really don't need to get into all of that. But if we're going to have cameras with it, we may want to coordinate with public safety or campus security, talk to them about how they have cameras and say, hey, by the way, I understand you have cameras on there for safety reasons, but we'd like you to cover, the door to the server room, the door to this wiring closet, because if they already have cameras, you want to make sure that they know where those areas are that need to be protected for IT. So letting them know is a good idea since they probably already control those cameras. So there's all kinds of different uses in here. Obviously, for criminals, we can detect when criminals are doing it. This one was an example of someone who is elder abuse. And then, of course, we have The Simpsons where they're watching their employees and seeing what they're doing. So there's a lot of security applications that will work for that. There's a lot of safety reasons why to have security cameras. It becomes a management tool and an investigation tool. Especially when we have anything where someone might steal something, we might be able to find out who did it. Visitor control. So this gets back to one of the questions about people having access to the data center all the time, or what do you do if external technicians need to get access to it? Well, we should have a visitor log. Who goes in? They sign in, they tell us why they're going in, and if we don't know who they are, we check their IDs. If someone comes to your office and they say, yeah, we're from Comcast and we're here to put some wires into your security closet, okay, who ordered it? I mean, if you're expecting the person to come, then great. Okay, yeah, we have an appointment with you. We know where you're coming. But if someone comes up to you and says, hey, I'm supposed to come in here and do this, then you should be asking, well, who told you to come? Let me call and verify that because I don't have a record of it. Because a lot of the ways that people will try and break into the system is what we call social engineering. And that's to say, well, look, I have a lot of appointments today. Either I'm going to go in and put your cable in or I'm not going to do it, and you'll have to reschedule. It would be better for you to reschedule than to let somebody in who shouldn't have been in the first place. So generally by appointment only is a good idea, and that somebody in IT has to follow them while they're there. Access records. You want to keep access records because you can go back later on in the if something happens in the server room and all of a sudden you find out, oh, someone put a keystroke logger on the server. Well, who did it? Well, I don't know. Let's go back to the records and see who was the person that last couple people that were in or whatever it is. So generally, what do you typically keep in access records? Who the person is, their signature, what form of identification that you ask for, if any, the date of the access, the purpose of the visit, and who is the person who scheduled that appointment for whatever reason. Power, a big issue with power is the concern that we might lose power. So what are we going to do if the power's out? Like in Japan, for some places it's been over a week that they've been out of power. So well, what are they going to do? The businesses can't continue if they don't have power, so what could we possibly do? Now, some campuses will have generators on campus, and so they can actually run. As long as they have fuel, they're able to run. Other campuses actually have solar panels and stuff like that on there. So if the power from utilities goes out PG&E, it may not be the end of the world because they actually have solar power for daytime use. Now, what they're going to do during the nighttime use when they're normally getting power from PG&E, I don't know. So that's where you might want to consider either having UPSs or power generators to make sure that you do that. There's other issues related to power and how the lines get run into the building, fire code issues related to that. Not really part of our concern, but the facilities people are going to know all about that. And if you try to rerun power or anything like that, you'll need to contact them. In a server room, you should have an emergency shutoff switch. This becomes a life safety issue. As an auditor, when I go out, I typically don't see these in server rooms. You need to have a switch that you can shut off all the electricity in the room, including the servers, even if they are on UPS. So if they're on an uninterruptible power supply, they need to be able to be shut off with a single switch, because if someone's being electrocuted and you shut it off, and the battery is just going to drain into that person. So you want to make sure that you can shut everything off. In addition to that, if a fire happens and the water sprinklers are about to start, you want to make sure all the power's off. Because if all the power is off and out of the machines, when the water hits the machines, you're more likely to be able to dry the computers out and recover them than you are if, and that's not even a guarantee that you're going to be able to do it, but if electricity is going through those circuits, when the water hits it, they will be fried, and that'll be the end of it. So you want to be able to have an emergency shutoff switch, so that one, if someone's being electrocuted, you can turn it off. Two, if the water starts coming from the power, you want to make sure that you can preserve the systems as much as possible. And if somebody's in that room and electricity is going through it and the sprinklers turn on, then water becomes a conductor and then electrocutes somebody anyways. So a life safety issue is something that you probably want to have if you don't have one of those. It needs to be an accessible location, and you want to protect it from accidental shutoff. So this particular model right here that I show a picture of has breakable glass. You have to break the glass in order to shut it off, or break the plastic on top of it. This one has it so that if you push up against the button, the faceplate here, the yellow part, is actually raised up, so that if you actually ran into it or put a step backwards and your back touched it, you wouldn't actually be touching the switch. You're touching the yellow part. You'd actually have to push inside of the switch in order to turn off the power. So you don't want people accidentally turning it off, because that would be bad, because that becomes an availability issue. So emergency power, again, how long are your UPSs rated for? In our server room, we have them only rated for about a half an hour. So we only have a half an hour of power for our servers. If the power's been out for longer than that, we're just going to have to shut down. So what is our UPSs rated for? Well, here's another problem. We buy UPSs, and then we add servers, and we add servers, and we add servers, but we don't add more capability. So what we thought we had a half an hour, we now have 10 minutes, right? So sometimes 10 minutes isn't even enough time to shut the machine down properly. So we want to make sure that we have enough to shut down the machines properly, and then guess what? The batteries don't last forever. We have to replace them every so often. So have we replaced them? When was the last time we tested them? Most of the APC type of ones, they have an alarm on them, and they'll start chirping once the battery is no longer good. By that time, it's too late. Your battery is already pretty much used up. Once the alarm's going off, that means that it's already used up its whole life, and you should have replaced it at sometime earlier than that. Other types of things that people are doing, power generators. And again, the question is, how important is uptime to the organization? Typically, uptime during the semester may not be as important as it is during admissions week and during finals week. That's when everything's much more important to have uptime. And then, how reliable is power? If you have power outages at certain buildings all the time, and your servers are in that building, or your core switches are in that building, you may want to switch that if the power is not available all the time. And again, a lot of places are starting to turn towards solar power. Generally, the way solar power works is during the day you get power from the sun, and during night you get power from PG&E. Any excessive energy that you get during the day, you sell to PG&E or Edison or whoever you are if you're in Southern California. You sell that to them during the day so that when you buy back during the night, it kind of washes everything out. So you end up not paying any money for energy, but they don't use batteries to store the energy. So during the nighttime, you're typically getting it from them. So your nighttime classes may be SOL, but your daytime classes, you may be able to operate things. So you have to take that into consideration when you're dealing with emergency power. Emergency lighting, here's a big thing that I always find. Inside of server rooms, there's oftentimes no emergency lighting. If the power goes out and somebody is inside of there, an employee, and there's no windows to it and no lights, how are they going to get out without tripping over something and hurting themselves or anything else? So there should be emergency lightings illuminating where the exit is in the server room. So if your server room doesn't have it, these are kind of a cheap thing. I think it's not even $50 to have one of these things put into a server room. I mean, the device costs $50, probably costs $100 to have the guy put it in, but it's a life safety issue, and if there is a power outage or something like that, we want to make sure that people can safely get out of there. Typically, if a fire happens, the power typically goes off around about that time, and if that happens, we want to make sure that people can still find their way out. We don't have them in a pitch black, dark room where they can't figure out where the out is, right? So we want to make sure we have that. Fire hazard. I tell you, when I do these audits, I always run into the strangest things. Again, a server room was in a janitor's closet, and in that janitor's closet, guess what they had? The thing that every one of us has probably seen in fire safety class is don't have a bucket full of oily rags. And that's exactly what they had. Sitting right next to the server rack was a bucket full of oily rags. It was turpentine or something like that. I don't know what it was. It smelled really bad. And I'm sitting right next to it. There was a spark that, it could ignite the fumes. And then what? We have a fire on our hands. So part of fire hazard is prevention, which part of that is security awareness or fire prevention awareness, and then two, keeping things away from it that are combustible. Fire detection, so do you have a fire detector in the room? A fire alarm, so that if the fire goes off, that it sets off an alarm so people can do that. Now, because campuses are public buildings, you already have the fire alarm and fire detection put into the building. You're supposed to have it by fire code. Now, what about fire suppression? So that always becomes the question that people ask about server rooms. I don't want water in there. I want something else. What am I going to do? I'll talk to you a bit about that. And then having fire drills on a regular basis. Most campuses will have those probably once a year. And again, that's handled by somebody else, typically. So fire suppression, you should have an independent power source for that. Again, the fire inspector is going to check all that stuff. You should, at the very least, you should have a properly rated fire extinguisher. If you're going to have sprinklers, the dry pipe type are the best. In other words, the pipe is empty, and if the fire alarm goes off, your switch will turn off all your computers, and then that pipe, as it starts to get filled up with water, and then it comes on in full thing. So it takes a dry pipe, because the pipe is empty, a little bit of time to charge itself before it actually starts sprinkling. That gives computers time to shut down properly. Wet pipe, as we all call it, instantly, as soon as the alarm goes off, water starts coming out, and that may not be enough time to shut off the computers, and computers may be damaged then. So you should have automatic shut-off for the servers for that. So a lot of people, instead of using water, they use something like halon. Well, halon you can't use anymore because it's bad for the ozone. So there's all kinds of these other gases that they have. Most of those gases, unfortunately, even CO2, take the oxygen out of the air, and that's how they kill the fire. But oxygen is something that people need too, so guess what? People can die too. So any time that you have any type of halon system or equivalent type of system, you actually have to have, there's all kinds of placards and stuff that you have to have on the doors, and your staff needs to know that if they're in that room, they need to get out immediately, because whatever that suppression is going to take the oxygen out of the room, and then it becomes, they need oxygen to breathe. So that becomes a life safety issue. In addition to that, what about toxic fumes, right? So plastics are burning, so there's going to be, people can be overcome by the fumes of that. Another type of thing to be careful about with fire suppression. Again, looking at your different types of extinguishers, make sure that you have the right kind of extinguisher. I went to one server room doing a thing, and they had a type A fire extinguisher, which is basically not the right type of fire extinguisher to have for electricity because it's water-based. And guess what electricity? It loves to go through water. So you can electrocute yourself with that one. So what you want to do is be careful about that. You make sure that you have C-rated fire extinguishers. A lot of times you'll see fire extinguishers that say ABC type. One of the things that you should also have is clearly designated where the fire extinguisher is. If you have a fire extinguisher in the server room, which I highly recommend, is that you actually have it located as to where it is. So people don't have to look for it. They just see the sign and they know exactly where it is. That's an important aspect of that. Other thing to watch in server rooms is you want to maintain the temperature and humidity levels. And temperature and humidity become very important. You want to monitor that, and you want to have it within a certain range. For temperature, you want to have the range between 70 and 74. Now, some server room people will say, hey, let's get it as cold as possible. However, if you get into those type of situations where they try to make it as cold as possible, the reason why they do that is because they like to overclock systems and things like that. It's generally not a good idea to do that because it's more wear and tear on the components. But typically, you want to keep the machines cool because of the overheat. That could be the end of your processors or your RAM or whatever you have in your system boards. In addition to it, you want to maintain a humidity between 45 and 60. Now, one person told me, "Oh, I thought we have to have zero humidity. We don't want any oxygen in or we don't want to have any moisture in the air." Well, the problem with that is high humidity. We don't want that in there because it's more vapors or liquid in the air, and therefore it causes corrosion. But low humidity causes static electricity. So actually, out of the two of those, the worst one for us is the low humidity because that causes static electricity. But usually the high humidity is not too bad. But if you go into a server room and you see like the sweat on the side of the servers or something like that, the humidity is too high. And so in your server room, you should have temperature gauges and humidity gauges, and typically in ours, we actually have it marked on the humidity gauge and on the thermometer what the range should be. This is difficult to do on the temperature as by the time the room hits a higher level, the internal server temperature is too high. Generally, yes. So what we want to have in those areas is things like that netbox I was telling you about that actually monitor and have alarms that if inside the case or the chassis of the server, the alarm goes off. That's what we want to have. In addition to that, our server room, we actually have it set up with two independent air conditioners. So if one fails, the other one takes over for the other one. And that helps us in that instance. So we have a backup for that to make sure. And generally, we haven't had any problems with that. Talking about your HVAC system, one of the things that people oftentimes don't know about, unless you're in the HVAC industry, you may not understand this, but you want to have a positive air pressure in the room. Why do you want to do that? That means there's more pressure inside the server room than on the outside of the server room. So what does that mean? That means air is being pushed into there so that it's always going out the door. Why do we want that? It limits dust from getting in. So it helps us keep a clean environment within the server room by just having a positive air pressure. And typically, in addition to that, you'll see in the diagram over here, they even put HEPA filters on those to keep dust from coming inside the server rooms. Again, that helps protect the vents. And again, the biggest thing with servers also is that dust, it gets electromagnetically charged, and then it wants to stick to something typically that it can, stick to, and that's going to be metal objects and stuff like that, such as heat sinks on your processors or on your fans inside the things, and then they get gummed up with dust and all that kind of stuff, and then your heat sinks aren't working properly, and then your machines are overheating because of that too. So you want to limit dust. Also remember that, not that we're trying to secure, national security issues here, but air vents could possibly be a way that somebody can get into the room as well. So what about water damage? Now, I have this cookie sheet over here, and someone's going to say, well, what is that cookie sheet there for? Well, here's another story for you. I'm doing an audit for an organization, and I go into their server room, and I look at the server room, and I say, well, why is that cookie sheet sitting on top of the server rack? And I look at it first, and I'm like, well, should I ask? Yeah, I think I should ask. So what's that there for? They said, oh, well, the air conditioner leaks, and it leaks right on the server rack, so we put that there to stop the water from leaking on the servers, which that sounds completely reasonable. We want to make sure that the water doesn't get onto the servers. However, what happens when that cookie sheet fills up? They're like, oh, well, that's only happened once before. Okay, so it's happened once, so we know that it could possibly happen again. So I said, oh, yeah, that's probably a bad thing. So on my audit report, we put that in there. Next year I come out doing an audit again. Guess what they did? They put a hole in the cookie sheet, and then they ran a garden hose from there. They caulked the garden hose inside the hole, and then they ran it down to a drain that was in the floor. So that was how they solved the problem. That's not the optimal way to solve the problem. They shouldn't have air conditioner right above the server rack such that if it leaks directly on the servers. Well, what about condensation on the cookie sheet? Yeah, that's another issue too. So we want to. So it's not a good idea. It's like the last thing that you possibly want to do. Making sure that if you have water pipes in the server room above it, because sometimes it's in a janitor's closet or it's newer restroom or something like that, you want to make sure that the master shutoff valve for waters is accessible, that it works, and that it's known by key personnel, so that if it's leaking, the IT people can go in and turn it off so it's not leaking on it. It's not just for the server rooms, it's for the wiring closets. Again, one of the places I worked for before, their wiring closet was in the janitor's closet, and there was pipes all over the place. It was not a good thing. Also, if you have drains, I have one client that has their server rooms in their basement. And what a positive flow water drains is, water can only go out, not in. And if you're below like a water level or water table, you don't want water coming back up through the drain. Like it backs up, you don't want that. You want to make sure that it's positive flow. In other words, it only can go in one direction, only out. Delivery rooms. So when people deliver computers and take computers off a campus, you want to make sure that someone authorized and monitors and controls equipment that comes and goes from the campus. I have this little picture down here of the guy with the wheelbarrow. I don't know if you've ever heard that story with the guy in the wheelbarrow, and every day he's leaving work with the wheelbarrow, and he's got something covering his tools on it. So the guy at the gate every day is like, let me see inside of there, and he opens it up, and it's always the guy's tools, or the guy's equipment, his lunchbox or whatever. He says, I know you're stealing something, but I don't know what it is. I'm going to catch you one of these days. Finally, after 20 years, the guy finally asks him, says, look, the security guard says, hey, look, I know you've been stealing something. I don't know what it is, and I've never caught you. But, now that you're retiring, just let me know what it was. And the guy says, wheelbarrows. I've been stealing wheelbarrows, right? So sometimes that happens right under our noses. In fact, one of the campuses at one of the community colleges actually had the IT manager was taking computers and selling them on eBay. Because he would order 30 of them when they only needed 25, take the other 5, and then go and sell them on eBay. So how do you deal with the purchase orders and all that? How do you deal with making sure that if you bought 5, that 5 end up? They weren't doing inventory counts of their equipment, so they didn't know what the yield was. So theft becomes a big issue with that. If you don't have an inventory of what you have, how do you know what you have, right? Alternate work sites for business continuity reasons, and we talked about that. We had a session on that last year on business continuity. But now that you have business continuity, how are you going to secure things there, right? So you need to take that into consideration as well. The location of systems. Oftentimes people say, where in our facility is the best place to put the server room? And what about where's the best place for a campus? Now, we don't have any control over that, but it's a good idea if we're planning things out to know what the proximity of emergency services is. So how far is the fire department away from the campus? So how much, that tells you how much fire suppression you really need to have in place and stuff like that. Is there any off-site hazards? I have one client, again, the one that's below the basement, right next to a river. And that river typically overfloods, and more than once their server room has been flooded. And they have to have a pump there on site all the time just in case the river ever goes up over again. And so the worst place that they possibly could have put the server room was down in the basement, and where do they put it? Down in the basement. What's another off-site hazard? I do a lot of audits for city clients, and one of the city halls is right next door to a train tracks, and the train tracks carry chemicals, dangerous chemicals, right next door. So if there was a derailment right there, there could be hazardous waste or something like that right next to City Hall, and then people wouldn't have access. You wouldn't be able to get to the server room. You'd only have remote access, if at all. So location is important. So avoid the basement, avoid the top floor, avoid the first floor, because that's typically if someone wants to break in and steal something, it's easiest if it's on the first floor. If you only have a first floor building, it's going to have to be on the first floor, right? But if you have multiple stories, first thing you should avoid is the basement. Second thing you should avoid is the top floor. Third thing is the first floor. Avoid being located, if your server room is going to be located somewhere near stairs, near bathrooms, near water pipes, near elevators, or anything that gives off electromagnetic radiation or emissions. Avoid any location that's on an external wall if at all possible, and avoid having the room have external windows or doors, because those are important aspects. Some of the things that some of the areas that you may be concerned about, if you have a plenum space, in other words, air goes in, if you have a false drop ceiling, the cables that you use in there have to be certain ratings so that there's a fire that they don't give off toxic chemicals, and those are plenum rated cables that you have to have. Raised floors, which you saw a picture of that in the previous one. If you have a server room, having a raised floor helps you protect the cabling. Also, if there is any water that gets into the server room, it's going to have to fill that space up before it gets to the racks. Drop ceilings can give access to server rooms, which is something that people don't think about. And then sometimes people put security mesh in the walls, like this example that I have over here, because I don't know if you know this, but like in buildings, if they have gypsum walls up there or drywall, it's not very hard to break drywall and get through a wall. People think that it's really hard, but it's really not that hard. So a lot of server rooms will put this security mesh in there that if you break through it, you still can't get through to the other side or the other side of the wall. Site security, again, picking your site and knowing if you have any risks like, train derailments. Are you in a flood zone? Are you on a fault line if you're in California? What about redundant roads or roads into the area? What about the crime rate in your area? All these things should be considered as a part of your risk assessment with your physical security in IT systems. So you have to take a look at that and figure out, well, there's higher risk here because of this, and then you can at least try to address it. Maybe you can't address it, but at least you know it's there. I know that a lot of people don't have the budgets to put in, the best security in the world, but at least if we know what the problem is, then there's a possibility of future addressing it. Knowing things like what the closest police station is, obviously you have campus police, but where the nearest fire department is, and all those types of things play an important part of that as well. And actually, when you get insurance for things, the insurance agents are going to look at that as well. Other types of issues that you might have is, and your physical security people or campus police are going to know about these types of things, but you see things like this, and you say, what's that? That's a bollard. What's that for? Well, that's to keep people from cars from coming in here and careening into this walk area and killing people. Also, in addition to that, you'll see that if you go out in front of Target or someplace like that, you'll see these things and you think they look decorative. Well, they're really there to help if a car goes out of control and is heading towards people coming out the store, that it'll hit this rather than the people. There are things about parking lights and lots and perimeter lighting and perimeter security and landscape that makes your building less of a target. So if whoever's doing setting up your facilities, if they take these things into consideration, which campus police probably should be doing, or probably has had some type of say in it, that makes you less of an attractive target for someone trying to break in and steal stuff out of your buildings and stuff. Information leakage, I put this in there because it's in most of the standards, although I think it's a little overkill for us. But the security mesh that they use oftentimes also is what we call tempest shielding, that stops electromagnetic information from getting outside of the walls. If you saw that movie Enemy of the State with Will Smith, and he's out there and they're afraid of the government or whatever, and he's trying to hide from the government, the guy has a little Faraday cage that he gets inside of, so that people cannot remotely listen to. If you have a monitor on and I'm 100 feet away, I can see whatever's on your monitor with little devices that they have out there. because this monitor gives off electromagnetic information that's wirelessly being transmitted across, and we don't even know that it's doing it. Cables also give off that information. So I can eavesdrop on a cable without even having to cut the cable open. So a lot of cables are made with shielded twisted pair, and they put the shielding in there so that it doesn't give off that information. Again, it's probably overkill for any campus, but it's an option that's out there. And the other thing is it also may protect us from any electromagnetic interference or any radio frequency interference. So using shielding cabling, usually shielded cable can go for longer runs than non-shielded cable. And then the other thing is we want to watch out for electrostatic discharge. So in your server rooms on the floors, you should have anti-static floors and anti-static wrist straps so that you don't accidentally have, when your kids used to run on the carpet in your socks, and then you'd shuffle your feet so you get a little charge, and then you go up and you'd touch your sister or your brother, and they get that little shock. Well, that little shock, just annoys them. But on servers, that can actually disable part of the server or the chip or whatever it is that got hit. So you don't want that to happen. So we use electromagnetic discharge type of devices. Some of them have server rooms. You'll see a metal plate in there that you can put your hand on, and it'll discharge you. You'll see those type of things rather than the anti-static wrist strap, but anti-static floors are good too. Making sure we have signage. We talked about signs for the fire extinguisher and for the exit and all that kind of stuff. We want to make sure we clearly mark those types of things for shut-off switches and valves as well, because that's oftentimes a life safety issue. Also, for theft, signs create what we call a psychological barrier. That's what we talk about in security. We talk about a psychological barrier. You'd be amazed at this. You can actually have a police tape, and that creates a psychological barrier, and people are less likely to try and cross that line, even though really it's really easy to cross that line. It's just a piece of tape. You can easily rip it and walk right through it. But when they see that barrier and it says do not cross, psychologically they don't want to cross it. So there's other types of things you can do, like keep out signs, that kind of stuff, that things like this that's an asset tag that people see that, they're less likely to want to steal it. It's not going to stop everybody. Again, it's really easy to break through a psychological barrier, but we talk about having a psychological barrier as a deterrent. Then we have alarm systems. That's another possible thing that we can look at. And basically, alarm systems, basically if someone triggers it, it should go off. Whether or not it calls the police is obviously, in our case, probably going to call campus security or police, and then they're going to deal with whatever the situation is. Generally, we don't have to have alarms everywhere, but we should probably want to have them on our server rooms and server closets. And then when we dispose of things physically, we want to make sure that we dispose of it in such a way that information is not left on it. I had a county here in Northern California who had the Child Protective Services had a bunch of their computers, and they upgraded their workstations. So they sold all their workstations to a friend of mine. A friend of mine got all the workstations. All the hard drives were intact with all the information on them. So we contacted them back and said, hey, did you realize that you gave us hard drives with all your information on it? And we gave them back to them. The reason for that is, if you think about it, if that got into the wrong hands, that's a life safety issue. I mean, when children are put into protective custody, it's because their life's in danger, and the information as to where they went is on those hard drives, and now somebody else has them, right? That's not a good thing. So when we get rid of things, typically there's data left on the things, and we want to make sure the data is taken off of it. In addition to that, we want to make sure that we remove any software for licensing reasons. So there's different ways of doing it. We can degauss hard drives or destroy them, or incinerators. How about physical information? Sometimes we can shred that as well. And just so you know, dumpster diving is not illegal. A lot of people will do that, so sometimes people will go in there and actually try and look for information in those locations. In fact, there's websites out there, go look it up, that have clubs of people that go out, and that's what they do, is to go look for information in dumpsters. If they don't do anything wrong with the information, then it's not illegal. Now, if they do something with it, then that might be illegal. So the question is, why are you doing the dumpster diving if some people say it's just for sport? Well, I don't know what the sport is, but anyways. Copiers. Here's another one. I got a video for here. If you want to watch it, go check it out. And this is a really good CBS article that was talking, or a video news article. And basically it shows that copiers have hard drives in them, and people, when you go to copy something, it makes an image of that copy, puts it on a hard drive, and then runs the job off. And then it leaves a copy on there until the hard drive gets filled, and then it removes the oldest ones and goes through. Problem is if you lose the copier and then your lease is up and you give it back to the copy machine, because most organizations lease them, they take them back. What do they do with them? They wrap them up and send them to Taiwan, or they send them to somebody else, or they resell them to somebody else. The other person who gets them, what are they going to do with them? Well, they take the hard drives out of them, they get the information off of it. So this investigation report that they did on CBS, they actually found copiers that actually had original still on the glass from police reports about ongoing investigation, and the whole entire report for that investigation was on the hard drive inside of it that was on its way to Taiwan. I mean, go watch the video. You'll be scared. Dentists in their office, and they have your medical records, and they put it in there, and that gets sent off. And hospitals, and think about your accountant who does your taxes and makes copies of it. Your tax return may be copied on one of those hard drives that who knows where it is. And you wonder why you're a victim of identity theft. Well, that might be one of the reasons why you're a victim of identity theft. Because if somebody had your tax return, they have a lot of information about you, enough to pose as you. So anyway, so when you get rid of copiers, you probably have to have some type of agreement with our copier. They actually charge us extra because we tell them we're not giving them back the hard drives. We keep the hard drives and they can take everything else. And because the hard drive has the operating system for the are part of the control mechanisms for the copier, we have to pay extra for it. But that's fine. We do that just so we don't have to worry about it. So different types of monitoring tools you can see out there. I talked about NetBots. It used to be a company, now it's owned by ABC. There's another company that does that kind of stuff called IT Watchdogs. And there's a couple other monitoring softwares out there. And then stuff for power management is available for you as well. Go out and check out those things. See if there may be a solution. There may be this IT Watchdogs. They have all kinds of little sensors for different things in your server room, moisture sensors, all that kind of stuff. And last time I checked, they weren't very expensive. But it was more like a salad bar, right? You pick this, you pick that, you pick what you want. The NetBots were more like, here's a package with everything in one nice little box you stick right on your server rack, and you're ready to go. So take a look at those types of things if you're looking for that. And with that, if there's any questions, I'll take your questions now.
And you can either write them in the chat area. Actually, it looks like everyone's on the computer, so we'll give you a minute to write them in the chat area. And while you're doing that, let me go ahead and give you the survey for today's seminar.
If you want to keep in touch with me, there's I'm on various social media sites, LinkedIn, Facebook, I have a page, Twitter, you can follow me on Twitter, or here's my email if you need to get a hold of me. If you have any questions about that, feel free to contact me. I usually put security tips and news articles and stuff like this up on my Facebook page, so if you follow it, or me on Twitter, or even actually me on LinkedIn, because they're actually all linked. So you'll actually hear about things, and in fact, I advertised this conference or this session on the Facebook page. I guess we don't have any questions. Well, thank you, Lorna.
During the seminar, you're welcome. You have a safe trip home.
Yes, I will. I don't know. I think I'm allergic to whatever they have out here because my nose is like all stuffed now. I was fine until I got here.
Well, we finally have a couple of days of sun, and that's what they're saying, too, is that the tree pollen is really high because we have so much rain. So welcome back. It looks like Steve has a comment here.
I see. So Steve has a good question. Steve, grab my email, send me an email, and then I'll send you a bunch of stuff on that. But just send me an email, let me know, and then I will email you back. Because there's a couple of different ways to do it, and it really is kind of like depending upon how your organization kind of operates and what the culture is like, and then just so email me and we can discuss it. All righty?
You might also want to save some of the slides even, Steve, from this presentation because it's such good information. That might be a bit to whet their appetite.
Well, in addition to it, one of the things that some people do is I oftentimes get called to make a recommendation because I'm an IT auditor, and I work for at Mason Associates. I'm an auditor, and so what I do, they'll say, "Is it recommended that you have?" Of course, it's recommended to it. So I have no problem making a recommendation that you should have it. And sometimes management will. It's the 50-mile rule. If there's an expert that's from more than 50 miles away, they will have a tendency to listen to them over their own staff. Why? I don't know why. It's a psychological thing. Enough of a known thing that we have an actual name for it called the 50-mile rule. Anyways, so
yeah.
Maybe that'll help.
But you're also an excellent resource, too. So.
Right. Yeah, and I can talk to those type of people because what they want to hear is, they want to know that whatever security you put in place is going to help them do whatever their mission is. So if you're a community college, your mission is to teach students. And a part of that mission is make sure that faculty can teach students, right? So how do they accomplish that mission? How do these policies help them do that? That's sort of how we have to address it. We have to look at it from that point of view,
right.
Because that's the point of view that they're looking at it from.
Exactly.
They don't want security just to have security. They want to know that it's going to help them do what they need to do. Otherwise, they look at it as, that's just a waste of time. So
you have to frame it within a student learning outcome. There you go.
Yep, that's absolutely it. All righty. Well, I got to run.
All right. Thank you so much.
All right. Thanks, Lorna. Thanks, Steve.
Thank
and
you.
everybody else.
Thanks, Steve.
All right. Bye.
Bye.